It's all the, as I normally would step on in.
Bring it in.
We're working at 120 miles an hour here. Don't even do it.
Technical problems we're having, but we're back online.
Yes.
So thank you and welcome. So back to item 3D, Beaumont Society of the Arts, Town of Beaumont policy. Please.
Thank you, Chairperson, Your Worship, and members of Council. Before you today, we have the Beaumont Beaumont Society of the Arts, Town of Beaumont Arts and Culture Policy draft for review with the Committee of the Whole. The policy has been being worked on back and forth between the Society and the Town administration for approximately the last year. We have had a number of meetings, and we feel that we're at that point to bring forward a draft policy. The policy highlights 5 or 6 pillar statements that Chantal and Grant will be highlighting in more detail, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So I'll turn it over to Chantal Yardley and Grant Tully from the Beaumont Society of the Arts. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I'd like to just take a minute and thank Carrie and Michelle Baronian right now for all their help in this process. It's been a real learning curve for me, and I want to thank them for their patience and time, because I'm sometimes not the best student. And so, yeah, I'm going to, we came to council, I gave you guys an update, but about 2.5 years ago, and we realized when we formed the Beaumont Society for the Arts that there was no policy in town, and that really no one knew how much money was being spent in the arts at all, and there was not really any documentation about anything. And so that's when we, and with council support and administration support, we decided we were going to spearhead a policy to get things more online. And so I'm here to, I'm just going to present sort of some highlights as we go through the policy, and then Grant is definitely the expert on this, and he will be fielding many of the questions you have. The first thing is the purpose of the policy is for the present and the future to educate both town council now and future councils on what challenges there are and opportunities surrounding specific elements of the community and its development. It's to establish organizing principles as well, and upon which sound value-based decisions can be made, and to provide a framework for governance models and to guide our behaviors moving forward in specific to the practice of art and cultural expression. So there's a bunch of definitions in there next to explain some of the things that we talk about as we go forward. And we've used some strategic directions of the town to sort of create this document. And so basically by saying yes to this, you will be affirming that the arts and cultural expression are essential elements to our town and the foundation of a truly civilized, progressive, and livable community, nation, society, and culture. And some of the things that we would like to keep in mind are the identity and community spirit of which Beaumont has, the French village, agricultural, and Aboriginal themes of which that our future developments may be adopting. We also want to keep in mind the economic role of the arts and cultural expression. We have 4 basic pillars of strategic directions for arts and culture in Beaumont. One of them is universality, in which we would like to make sure that access to and participation in artistic and cultural activities will be inclusive and equitable, equitably accessible for all residents of all ages and abilities. And we also speak about capacity, that this policy will enhance Beaumont's capacity to support and promote cultural activity by fostering growth and sustainability. And excellence in art and culture in Beaumont's artists, arts, and cultural organizations, as well as help create an appreciation through artistic and cultural programs and events. The town of Beaumont will foster appreciation for the arts for all residents. Now on to our policy statements, of which we have 6, I believe. The first is a Beaumont Arts Council, and right now there is a minimum of 12 community volunteer groups that are arts-based, and the arts and cultural community of interest in Beaumont, as represented by the Beaumont Society for the Arts, intends to create the Beaumont Arts Council for the purpose of efficiency and effectively being able to communicate, providing a forum for developing coordinated and collaborative artistic and cultural public events, and mostly to serve as an effective and single spokesperson between which the artistic and cultural community and the town of Beaumont Council can have a sounding board, and you don't have to go to a million different places and try to find all these people. We hope to create a united front where we can all communicate and agree on things. And the policy explains how we're going to do that. The second policy statement is about arts education and cultural literacy. So we're hoping that excellence in artistic endeavors and in cultural expression begins with the development of talents and teaching people. And so obviously education would be something important that we would want to keep in mind as policy creation. And these education can happen through collaborative initiatives, programs among artists, arts and cultural organizations, and the arts and cultural community of interest in Beaumont. It would be inclusive of arts education scholarships for really all different types of people. I will highlight that discussion, educational, and training forums and conferences for Beaumont artists and arts and cultural organizations, cultural diversity initiatives, and heritage appreciation and interpretation initiatives, as well as several others. And policy then explains how we will make that happen. Number 3 is cultural facilities and arts infrastructure. So Beaumont has produced many fine artists in many fields of artistic expression. It is from within the creative environment of a home for the arts, and the artists are nurtured and supported in their chosen disciplines. Within such spaces, patrons of the arts nurture their understanding of and appreciation for and enjoyment of the arts and culture that are abundant in Beaumont and the region. These spaces will become gathering points for the present and many future generations of artists and patrons. And there's a nice explanation of how the creation of a cultural facility may be created in the implementation of this policy, and not single to the town of Beaumont supporting the Beaumont Society for the Arts. Would love to assist and take leadership on major fundraising campaigns and be a part of a number of planning and project management we already have a number of planning and project management documents which we would love to share and be open with and just work openly with administration, town council, and everyone. Number 4 involves municipal funding for the arts and cultural development in Beaumont and region. So many municipalities in Alberta and beyond strive to achieve a 2/3 to 1/3 funding ratio, that's 66% to 34% within their sport, recreation, arts and culture operational funding envelope that positively impacts arts and culture. That is to say, for every $2 allocated to sports and recreation, $1 is allocated to arts and culture. This formula is not intended to imply, nor should it be inferred, that the arts and culture sector is in competition with the sport and recreation sector for the same financial resources. Rather, this formula is created to be an initiative acceptable to all stakeholders for the allocation of financial resources within any identified municipal funding envelope in a community seeking to develop and enhance its sporting, recreational, cultural, and artistic sectors. The formula and policy is not intended to spark nor impose massive nor rapid tax increases to fund artistic and cultural initiatives. Rather, this policy is intended to contribute to and normalize municipal financial supports already pertaining to artistic and cultural development and expression as an ongoing municipal program for and service to the residents of Beaumont. The policy talks about having dedicated municipal funding, that's both in operational and capital funding, self-sufficiency, and participation by Leduc County. And number 5 of the policy is public art. So much of the community's cultural life and community spirit revolves around publicly displayed artworks in a variety of media formats and manifestations. Public art may both be functional and decorative, in either case providing pleasant and pleasing public environment for residents and visitors alike. So things like fountains and things like that also count under this type of public art discussion. And basically, the policy would include a 1% funding formula. This is pretty typical, and overall to the capital budget, I believe, on any capital project. Public art, there's a couple items here. Public art by local and regional artists. We would try to obviously support local and regional artists when creating or putting in public art. And we would also have discussions around the means of acquisition. So sometimes people get gifted art from other communities and things like that, and we would also want to be able to have an open discussion about whether we think that certain pieces of art should be placed in certain areas. We also encourage the French Village theme as public art, and we discussed typonymy as being a part of the arts and culture area. Number 6, artistic freedom and media awareness. This is discussing basically our Canadian Charter of Rights, and the right to intellectual freedom is established by law and is essential to the health and development of a free and democratic society. And so using the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Alberta Bill of Rights and Alberta's Human Rights, Citizenship and Multiculturalism Act, we basically would apply those beliefs to the art that we would be supporting and encouraging. And attached to that is the Canadian Library Association Statement on Intellectual Freedom and Libraries. Yeah. And the other part of that last policy is media awareness, and the fact that the town of Beaumont and Beaumont Society for the Arts, you know, you are responsible as a patron of the arts to educate yourself on what is happening in that artistic venue, and that in particular, parents of minor children bear responsibility to inform themselves on the intent, nature, and content of the artistic work in advance. And that's my preamble and my sum up of that as fast as I could. And you all, I am assuming, have read it and probably have questions. So yeah, just wanted to run over it in general. And if you have any questions, Grant and I are here.
Fantastic. Again, a fantastic presentation, so thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Schwartz first, anything further?
None for me, unless Mr. Hiltz has got anything.
No, I think we'll open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Council, worship, anything further?
I got a couple, but other council wants to go first.
Okay,
Steve, at a high-level lead-off question, maybe for administration, Mr. Hiltz. Is it common practice for a user group to bring forward a policy like this? There's a tremendous amount of work that's went into this.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Council. It's not typical. Usually what happens is a user group or a society will bring forward a concept, and the administration will research various types of policies or research papers, and we'll work back and forth, and we'll come forward with a workable model. In this case, we're kind of using more of a community development approach where they're doing the heavy lifting, we're providing input, and then we will hopefully have a policy at the end of the day that works for them and works for the town.
Good. I didn't think it was typical. I just wanted to ask the question to say thumbs up. A lot of work, so thank you.
thank you. Mr. Stout.
Thank you. Would it be the intention to have council representation on the policy? Council. It's in the council, isn't that sentence?
Certainly no objections. I think it would be actually commendable and desirable to have a council representative, at least in an ex officio capacity, to contribute to the Arts Council discussions and forum.
Thank you. Can I ask another one?
Please do.
There is also a reference to spending amounts on art, on public art, for instance, and also on a ratio formula. But in the preamble, it referred to the fact that it was very difficult to obtain an exact figure for how much money was being spent. It was allocated to arts, but to arts budgets, because we don't track that.
Shields?
That was a good question. I think moving forward, that'll be something that if the policy is approved, that we will be tracking. What happened is when we were looking at the budget, we were looking at those programs that arts and culture that the town offers from services programs that happened in the recreation and sport area would have positive impacts on arts and culture. So it could be like figure skating, for example, would have a positive impact on arts and culture. It could be our summer camps that dealt with performing arts, for example. So we had to audit all of our programs, and we came up with a number. And that number, out of all of our programs, look at the ratios and stuff like that we agreed upon, and when we did this in collaboration, was about $650,000. And then we went back and we looked at how much we were actually spending against that, and we're spending about $460,000. So we had about we're about $190,000 deficit in that area right now, and that's basically what we're looking at over the next, once the policy is approved, over the next 4 to 5 years of making that deficit up, if the policy is approved. And that way we're kind of hitting that number and being in terms of that 64 or 66, 34% quotient. And that is not to say that $650,000 would go to the society. That's a combination of grant money we provide them plus what the town is providing.
Excellent, thank you. So, coming out of that, would we need to change our accounting practices to be able to track how much, what the art budget is?
We'd be able to probably, it's another good question, we'd probably be able to track it to a point, without getting into those minute details of what we can do within our budget processes and things like this. But knowing this going forward, it'll make it a lot easier than what we had to do.
Yes, understand, and I agree completely. I'm just thinking of, the next time I come to a budget, will I be able to see a line item that says art budget, or is that not feasible or not practical?
I think once the policy is approved, what the Beaumont Society of the Art is, instead of it saying the recreation and parks budget or the recreation and sports budget, it would say recreation, arts and culture budget kind of thing. So they would be included in that. And then probably as we're breaking down those percentages and things, there would be part of that wheel would show what we're contributing to the arts.
And then it enables me to look at the ratios of the sort of spending that's referred to there. Thank you. That was what I wanted to.
Great. So I get Bill next. Councilor Now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As Steve mentioned, this is a very impressive document. A lot of work went into this. A lot of thought too. I found it very easy to read. It was easy to follow. It was well laid out. My compliments for that effort. A couple of questions in general, if I may. Assuming for a moment we were to adopt this policy as is, as we're seeing here, my interpretation is that we are looking at committing the town of Beaumont to construct a arts and cultural facility. That's the intention of the policy. Is that correct?
It would be promising support in the future building of an arts.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming
facility.
that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up question. With the funding model predicted in the Part 4, one could assume that if you spend $30 million on an aquafit, you would spend $10 or $15 million on a arts and cultural facility. I'm trying to get my head around the way you're seeing this being laid out.
I feel like, yeah, do you want it? Yeah.
In terms of, thank you for the question, Council, is that in terms of the buildings and things like that, we didn't consider that in terms of that ratio. Basically, that's not kind of part of that discussion where we would say that we would spend, 2/3 on a rec facility, we're only going to spend 1/3 on arts and culture. It's going to be based on driven need of the community, and in terms of those discussions that are going to go back and forth between administration, council, and the Arts Council, and based on community input, et cetera, that we're working through in the master plan. But the two things are kind of separate.
Thank you. If I may. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I got Sam next. Unless you have something.
Just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
I do appreciate that. I'm trying to get my head around the concept of it, and I understand it's not written in stone. I get it's a fluid document, and I understand the intent. I'm trying to get my head around, potential expectations. I know in life, if you don't ask, you don't get. I understand that part of the equation, but there's also a facility would involve a lot of expenditure, and I see some long-term potential for that. If you could, Mr. Hills, just get my head around that, the deficit of 100 and some odd thousand in the document, who covers that deficit at the present time? It's just not, it's not covered, it's simply a deficit and lack of...
That's not there.
Yeah.
It's simply not there. No, it's not a deficit that we're covering.
No.
Okay, I interpret the deficit being something we're actually covering from town revenues to...
We're not meeting.
Just clarify what that meant.
In terms of the formula, 66%, 34%.
We're meeting
short by
25%.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to get it clarified. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Sam, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very excited for this. I've been looking forward to this since I was elected. I know having some discussions prior to the election and post, one of the frustrations for me is not being able to allocate capital and funding because of not having a policy. Not because I didn't believe in it, but just my own personal belief that I needed to allocate capital based on your policy. So again, I'll echo what everyone said. A lot of questions that might have been answered, but I understand this is the format to roll up our sleeves and get into it, so I'm going to ask some questions here. Talking about the Beaumont Arts Council, I think the question was asked, will a member of council be appointed to that? I would support that, certainly, for us to be a part of that. I think that would be a great endeavour. As you mentioned, ex officio there would help. On the cultural facilities piece, I think I've commented on this several times. This is a really important part of our community, and I go back and forth on it's probably more important than a rec facility for me personally, for what it would do to our community. So I guess it's similar to Bill's question about the guidance document. This is a guidance document, but what's to stop you coming back to us and your very aggressive self in front of us and say, oh, I know, but what's to stop you say, hey, your policy says you're going to support us, so in 2019 budget, where's our 20 million? So I'm just trying to get a sense of it's a guidance document versus enforcement, I guess. So what's
timelines,
kind of
expectations.
Yeah, just around it, right? So, I mean, I think my support is clear for it, but, with all the challenges that we have in terms of allocating capital, so what's the purpose of you putting it in there? Is that more of an intent?
Yeah, I think so. For me, if I'll speak first, I guess. I think it's just like a future looking at this is something that we need to make happen, and whether it's putting $500 in a savings account every year, because we haven't spent that on arts and culture. If we had almost a $200,000 deficit that could have been going to the arts, that could have gone towards just putting it away and saving it for, a future facility. We're not here to, again, take anything from other people.
Yeah.
We just want, 2 years ago we came with the theme of we want our piece of the pie, and that's what we're here for again. We just want our piece, and we want to make sure that it works within the town as well. And I don't know if I can say, I promise I won't come, but I think we just want to be able to start, as soon as we get said yes, we can start looking towards this. Then we can start looking for external fundraising like federal and provincial dollars. That's until the town says yes, we're going to support this. It's not so much even the money. We just need you to say, yeah, we're going to let you guys do this. Then we can start finding stuff elsewhere as well, that it's not just you, I think. Is that fair to say?
That's fair. And for me, I mean, that's exactly where I was going. It was one of the hardest things for me was when we voted on the funding for the grant funding to be matched, and we knew what it would mean if we said no, but again, no policy. So now that if we get this policy, that's something where we could show that commitment. So I appreciate the intent there. if I may, Chairman. 66-34 ratio, you mentioned many municipalities have adopted this. I'm just curious if you could give me some examples of these many municipalities.
Let's think back. You go. It's been a while.
I'd have to dig through my files here. When we started this process of writing a policy and preparing a policy, we being the board of directors of the Beaumont Society for the Arts, we all had our homework assignments, and it was quite an interesting process. We cast our view across the country, and we looked for municipalities that were approximately the same size as Beaumont was 2 years ago when we started this process. And we wrote to them, emailed them, phoned them, and said, send us a copy of your arts policy, which they did. We looked through them and tried to identify what would be applicable to Beaumont. And then what you have in front of you is an amalgamation of the best of those policies. We got it was something in the order of 22 to 23, something like that, policies from communities across the country, including Quebec, several from Quebec. We thought that was important given our French theme here. And that the item that you're speaking to, the ratio split, appeared in actually only in 1 or 2 of the written policies, but when we called them back and spoke with them, we said, do you have a formula, a funding formula? Because we knew that would be one of your questions. And many of them said, well, we have an unwritten formula, and they told us it varied from about 75%, 25%, up to 50-50 in terms of that envelope of recreational, artistic and cultural types of things. So we landed on 66-34 as a reasonable split of that funding, recognizing we had a lot of our artists who said, no, it should be the other way around. The arts should get 66%, and of course that's understandable too. But we felt that the 66-34 was reasonable in terms of what other communities in Alberta do, and we thought that it was important for us to get it in writing because so few communities out there have a written law, but many of them do use that kind of a funding split.
Yeah, I would
in practice.
Yeah, I support that. Getting in writing certainly makes our job a lot easier, but also. I appreciate where you're coming from. You're lobbying, right? And I get whenever I see many municipalities, everyone thinks it's a great idea, so you should do it, right? So just trying to get a bit of context. So at some point down the road, when it does come back in a bit more detail, I would appreciate some background examples of that, whether it's unwritten rules or written, would be appreciated. Last 2 quick comments. The public art 1% formula, and similar to what Bill mentioned, 1% of every capital dollar, so Aquafit, $300,000 for public art. To me, that seems reasonable, and I think that would be something that would be encouraging for us to work with the society on. It's going to be and I'm just using that as an example, but it's a large facility. There's plenty of space for whether there's a sculpture up front, whether there's art inside the building, all that sort of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that, and again, having something, whether we end up 1% or whatever the number ends up, but just something, again, written in stone that we can, because I think it will do wonders for our community there. So I just think it's an excellent document. Really looking forward to having it come formally through. So thanks for all the hard work that you've done, and it's gonna pay off for our community. So thank you.
Okay, Councilor Barnard.
Thank you, Chair Hendricks. I don't know if I'm coming in any sound, if it's working. It's kind of far away from here, so I'm leaning this way. Thank you, and good job. You can see the years of experience and knowledge that's gone into the policy development. One of Sam brought up some of my concerns, Councillor Monkoff-Swain, not so much as a concern as just to be really clear what we're approving when we do get to be actually voting on this. I have no difficulty with the direction. I sat 9 years on the Edmonton Arts Council, so I know this is the direction, it's best practice, it's a great way to go. The difficulty comes when you're tying council's hands to how much money you're getting by when. And I saw some things in here that to me look like implementation, not so much policy. And I would like the administration, when we bring it back for approval, to separate those out if possible. So we know we're approving a policy. Well, they know they're getting work from this. And instead of we're approving the funding per year. So there was a 5-year maximum in here. There was the county's participation. A lot of things that I don't think your policy, our policy, can approve without having the county say yes and things like that. So it's administrative, and I don't think that I'm saying anything against the direction that you're going in. It's more about making sure the council doesn't have to say no because we don't have the money. It says yes to the policy, but the timing might have to be adjusted in the amount. So that would just be my request to the administration when you bring it back to us to give us more detail on that.
So let me do this, Your Worship, has been patiently waiting, unless you want Mr.
Let Mr.
Hills.
Hills
Go ahead.
chime in, and then I'll...
Sure.
Thank you, Chairperson and Council. We've had a lot of debates on the formatting of the document and things, and we've had and some of them have been, we agree to disagree, but we need to move forward. But before this comes back, is we'll need to do a full administrative review, like planning and our integrated growth and planning. They'll need to go through the document as well because of the placement of public art and the MDP process and all these things like this. So we'll be going through this, and it's going to come back in a format that is kind of part of the town's policy requirements and things. So those things are going to be taken into consideration. It's going to be a policy document, and there's going to be probably having to be like a framework document and an action plan out of that's going to come out of this, and that's what's going to probably be more the meat and potatoes that council will sink their teeth into at the end of the day for each year through the budget process. And also too, through the upcoming master plan for recreation, parks and facilities, one of the outcomes is to work with the Beaumont Society of the Arts. So that is a consideration in terms of future facility development, etc., for that for that time period of the document and life of the document.
Thank you.
Thank you. Your Worship.
Okay, so yeah, I have some comments, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I see some real landmines in this policy currently for council. And recognizing that we are very, very short of resources and we have many, many competing interests, I hesitate, like Councillor Barnhart's mentioned, just to tying council's hands with money. Because and don't get me wrong, I'm very much in favor of a policy. I think art should be funded, but when we look at ratios and we have $191,000 shortfall that we're going to implement over 5 years. I don't necessarily see that as a basket of money that can go out and be spent. I personally would like to see it as an aspirational target to be done, and if we can come up with programs and things that need money, let's fund those rather than trying to fit it into this budget. Because then if we run past it, because I don't want the sports groups coming back to me either and going, well, they're now at 50-50. We want to raise on ours to get back to the 60-40 split. So for me, I'd rather see what's the need in the community and fund that and get that going. The creation of the cultural facility, I'm all on board, but it's got to be in conjunction with the master plan and how it goes, because like Councillor Munkoff-Swain mentioned, it's got to fit into the overall master plan. And yes, I'm very intent on getting and developing a facility, but once again, we have a large amount of competing needs, and I think I've mentioned this before. And I'd rather see it as part of a very multi-use civic center facility than a standalone out on the 80 acres. And as I said, and once again, getting back to money, I don't think I want to see us binding Leduc County without talking to Leduc County in our own policy document. Because yeah, they could very easily come back and say no. So I don't mind going out and starting those conversations with the mayor of Leduc County if the administration would like me to do that. But we have to do that. And the 1% funding formula, as I said before, we have a number of competing needs. We found out we're short of office space. The fire hall is going to need some upgrades. The youth center needs some upgrades. The RCMP's got a very aggressive hiring plan coming. And a 1% cap is, well, it's standard in most municipalities. I'd like to see a reasonable cap per project put on it, because as Councillor Moncassin put out, 300 grand, well, that's a major reno to another facility. And while I'm supportive of public art, I think we need to put a reasonable cap on what we need to do per project. And those are pretty much my comments on the document. And you're frowning, so have at it.
My natural expression. No, if I may comment on that, we put hard numbers to this, the 66-34 split, the 1% for public art, simply because historically and traditionally in Alberta and beyond, arts have been seen as a frivolity, as a hobby, as an afterthought. Mm-hmm. And whenever you get into a capital project or into even an operational kind of annual event, the very first thing when funding becomes an issue, and it always does, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, you were the stewards of the public trust and the public funds. But the very first thing that falls off the table is the arts and the cultural stuff, because it has been traditionally seen as an extra, an add-on. So that's why I was frowning a bit, is that I would hate to go back to that, where it's this nebulous, yeah, we'll support the arts, except when. No, there needs to be, I think, I feel strongly, there needs to be a commitment. Some kind of commitment. Maybe it's not 1%, maybe it's 0.5%, whatever. You can decide what's reasonable in the case of Beaumont. But I do believe there needs to be a hard number or a hard formula there for this to go forward in a positive way.
And I'm not proposing that we don't do that. Maybe it's 1% with a $50,000 max to start out with. Something
that,
like,
sure, whatever you feel is reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to speak to that point. Mr. Tully spoke a lot more eloquently than I was going to, but just in support of that, I think we've seen and shown in Beaumont that if we don't have it, then we've seen the shortfall that's there, right? So that's why, and so your follow-up comment kind of addressed that, saying you're not opposed to putting something in there, we'll just work out the number, that's fine, I support that, but I completely agree with the comment that it's always the first thing to drop off, and if we mandate it and put it part of, we know it's an upfront cost, then that's something that we can, and you'll see the benefit across the community. So I thank you for saying a lot better than I could.
Councillor Steve.
Just comment quickly on public art. It's got a bad rap in the last few years, whether it's a big circle or a pile of balls or a bunch of girders sticking out of the ground that may or may not have consulted others. I think that those are probably bad examples of public art, and the public art examples that you don't hear about are the good ones, and are the ones that fit in, and are the ones that are relevant. So, you know, I support public art, but not crazy stuff.
It's in the eyes of the beholder.
Question to you, if I could, that the last time you presented, I brought up the Mary Winspear Center in Sydney.
Right.
Did you check out their website? No.
I'm sorry.
I was hoping that you
I did.
Did you?
Good.
And
I'm sorry.
what I was trying to do is find out scale and scope. Is that the scale and scope that you're looking for?
Yeah, certainly something of that magnitude and more.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Given the size of the population in that community,
Yes.
which is identical to Beaumont, and certainly the tremendous theater and other productions that they put on, and the way that facility is set up. So it probably wouldn't hurt just for our administration to download at least the layout and then circulate that to our councillors, just to get a scale and scope so people understand in rough terms what you're looking for in terms of seating, arrangement, layout, that sort of thing. Thank you.
Next
Councillor
comment. I just wanted to reinforce the comments that Mr. Tully had made. Whilst I certainly agree with the Mayor that we obviously have to keep spending under control and be spending where we need to spend, and at the same time, your remark about the art being the first thing to fall off the table, because it's the nice to have, but it's not seen as essential. So it's the nice to have, and the other things are essential. So if you have to make some cuts, well, we'll get rid of the nice to have thing, and that's the art, almost invariably. And that's been the history, I think, the history that I've seen here, which leaves us in the situation we are now in, that we are a town of 20,000 people thinking about deciding whether or not we should be calling ourselves a city, and we have no performing arts space of any kind that I'm aware of. Thinking of...
We have some bad ones.
Well...
Sorry, we have some small ones, but they're not...
There isn't anything suitable for a public event of 200 or 300 people to attend. In any kind of, art, music, drama, dance, there is absolutely no facility available. And contrast with Leduc, for instance, which installed the McLab Centre when they were at a population, I think, under 20,000. And that's the reason why. That's why we needed this policy. And yeah, we can quibble about what the actual ratios are and what the amounts are, and we can incorporate some flexibility and say, well, yeah, normally it would be 1%, but not in this case because we don't have the funds available this year or whatever.
Right. Okay. On that note, I think next steps are with our administration, and of course, bringing it forward to council. So thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you all, and I just really appreciate your guys' really supporting this and looking at it and trying to move it forward, and just know that this could be positive change for you as our, the head of this town. By saying yes and supporting this, you're moving for positive change in this town. You're not just sticking with the status quo. You're going to help things and people, and it will make a difference to the atmosphere of this town and to the residents here. So thank you again, and thanks.
Okay, next item up is 3E Cannabis Survey Results. Kerry Hiltz and Duso.
Yes, it's me again.
Yeah.
So I'd like to, so thank you, Chairperson, Your Worship, and members of Council. I'd like to take this opportunity before we get into the request for direction. Kandisu, I'm going to say it wrong, Nambiria, who is our municipal intern for the next year. He's working with Community and Protective Services, but he'll also be exposed to all the different areas within the town. I'm bringing Kandisu with me today because he was the one who put a lot of the legworks into the report and into the survey results, and it's a really good opportunity for him to get in front of elected officials to do the presentation. But please be nice. It's very nervous. He's very nervous. So anyways, but it'll be good. So the last time we were in front of you guys was in late November of last year, and we brought forward some key concepts from the federal government and the province of Alberta in terms of the legislation. And at that time, they were looking at the legalization within a boxed framework of cannabis that would come into effect in July 1st. Since that time, they've kind of moved away from the July 1st timeline. The legislation has been tied up in the Senate, and there has been some federal pushback from municipal police forces, etc., in terms of being able to adequately deal with the impaired driving issues with cannabis legalization. And also with that, too, is in terms of the consultation with Indigenous populations has also come up. So right now, they've kind of opened up the door that it'll be legalized by the end of the year. It could be any time in the fall. So right now, we're bringing you the results of the survey. We're not talking about consumption, but I'm open to answering any questions about consumption tonight, because that is what also has been kind of almost frameworked to what we can and what we cannot do in terms of that area. So I'm going to turn it over to Kandisu, who's going to kind of review the findings from our survey that closed on April 20th.
Your Worship and members of Council, in highlighting the data from the survey, I'm just going to run down the list on our major topics of conversation and hopefully answer any questions you might have in the end. So we had a sample of 640 respondents that took part in the survey. 93% of them were residents of the town of Beaumont, and the rest were business workers. And in our first line of question, we found that the majority of the respondents were somewhat familiar with the roles of government in strategies related to the legislation of cannabis in Canada. And we surmised that about 3/4 of those respondents were in the very least aware of these roles and strategies, and about 1/4 of them were not aware at all. And moving on to the next question, in preparation of a framework that would allow the town of Beaumont to manage cannabis-related land uses, we found that the majority of the respondents, which were slightly above half of them, wanted to find a balance between economic opportunities and the health and wellness of the community, followed by about by a third of them that wanted to solely focus on the health and wellness of the community. And the last was about 16% that only wanted to focus on the economic opportunities. Now, in relation to this question, and on to the next question, we found that half of the respondents wanted a framework on regulation similar to that of liquor stores. And about 1/4 of them wanted to increase regulation as compared to liquor stores. And in considering the locations for cannabis retail stores, which is on the next question, we had the majority of respondents favor retail stores in commercial areas, and then followed by the city center, then industrial parks, and lastly, residential areas. And leading on from this question, in regards to a separating distance between recreation facilities, parks, daycares, and cannabis retail stores, slightly more than half of the respondents favored a separating distance, a minimum of 500 meters, followed by 1/4 of them that favored a distance between 100 and 400 meters. And the last was 1/10 of them that wanted a minimum of about 400 meters. Now, most of the respondents favored to let the market dictate the concentration of cannabis retail stores in strategic area of the town of Beaumont, and a less proportion of them wanted or favored the dispersion of cannabis retail stores in strategic area. And in our final line of question on other topics of conversation and discussion that related to cannabis that the town of Beaumont can take into consideration or investigate, our responses centered around 5 key themes, and which were on the distribution, consumption, health hazard, responsible use, and safe production of cannabis in the town of Beaumont. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just kind of wanted to bring Council's attention to page 79, 80, 81, the three map attachments. So just to kind of get the sense here, because the first map basically shows the 100-meter buffer between schools and any retail spaces. So really, in the grand scheme of things, very little in terms of our commercial would be affected by that by the 100-meter buffer that the province has laid out. Where it becomes more of an issue in terms of the survey question is when people did speak about buffering for 500 meters away from parks and recreation facilities on attachment 4, it's one red blob. There is no opportunity for any retail in town. That's the next one more. So that just kind of shows you that it basically it's all encompassing. And even the map that's the page before that for a 100-meter buffer from all of our parks and rec facilities and things, it pretty much covers the whole retail spectrum as well. There's a few little green spaces, but that really doesn't correspond to anything where we have retail opportunities. So that's going to be one of those discussions through the land use bylaw and things like that that are going to be more of a topic discussion. And we don't know in terms of the survey data if it's more from the perspective of that they were, if people were, it was a cold, just saying, no, we have to be 500 meters away, or it's more from the consumption perspective. It's not so much that the store is sitting there and someone goes and buys it because they're not, because of the signage and stuff like that, it's going to be so regulated, or is that they really want to keep people from consuming the product. And so that really was kind of the one question in this whole survey that was a little bit more not as clear. But just to give you guys some perspective, that's going to be that'll be one of those discussion points. Thank you.
Looks like a great opportunity for golf course.
So, questions, Council, then Councillor Barnard, please.
Yeah, the first question, based on what you just said, that map really did, I was like, okay, I need an overlay, I can't figure this one out. Thank you. It's obviously more simple than I was making it. Can we limit the number? Are we allowed to limit the number of retail outlets?
Well,
thank you for your presentation, by the way. Good job.
Yeah, he did a very good job. Where the limiting is going to come into is that before they can even come to the town of Beaumont and just get a license, they have to go through the Alberta Liquor and Gaming and get approval from them through their screening process. I believe one has been granted for Beaumont right now, and in terms of what that will look like in terms of coming through when our I guess our processes are all in place for approval. But it's not going to be that we're going to have 15 coming. We'll probably only have in Beaumont, kind of like liquor stores, we can only have 4 or 5 I think in the community right now, because they have to be 500 meters apart from each other. So that's a limiting. So if we went with something right now, liquor has to be within our land use. It's 500 meters. So so that does create. So we're kind of limited in terms of having those. It's 500, right? Great. So that's going to limit that as well if we do follow our town's liquor store policy as well. The province is following very much a very similar path as the liquor and gaming. So this will probably be, we may take that same approach as well. We have had some discussions as a cannabis working group that may be more of the approach that we'll take.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from Council? Steve.
Hello, thank you. I'm not sure if I was spoiled by the urban agriculture folks, but I really loved reading through the comments at the end of their presentation. I don't know if are we talking hundreds of pages of comments? Or
lots.
What are we talking? Because I think I didn't look back, but there must have been 25 or 30 pages in the urban agriculture stuff, but I don't know, is it unreasonable to ask for those, or is there so many?
We can make those through the council. We can make those available for those that want to. We can leave a copy in the council room or send them out to read them and things. It's when you're looking at the comments, some of them it's more for. I don't want to some of them are very good, but some of them are interesting. I'll put it that way to be polite.
That's fair, for sure, and I think you probably did a really good job summarizing the themes. I'm not questioning that at all. It's just I like to get into the nitty gritty of things at times. So,
Sam.
Firstly, great job, Conduso. Thanks for putting this all together. It's great that they threw you into the deep end on one of these issues, and one of the more detailed ones. So looking forward to everything coming back. My comments around this, I found it. This obviously I'm more of a visual guy, so I found this very interesting. I think it'd be important when we go back out that these maps are put out there for the public so that they can see, because I think, without not wanting to put my mind in someone who's filling it out, but generally, the further away from a park, the better, right? So that's what you're gonna click. And so just to show the visual of what that actually does, I think would help with that perspective. So a couple of comments on that one. We always get these surveys in and it gets presented to us, but is there a way that we can, PDF them and put them up? I know that's on our agenda, but is there some way that we can, from a communication perspective, put them up so people say, hey, I wonder what the results of those surveys were? All of our surveys are on our, Beaumont page /surveys. You can go look at the agricultural survey. You can go look at all the past, and so people can get a sense. So that was just a comment. And then the next piece is, and you obviously this didn't talk about consumption and where we had 2 presentations on it. To me, that seems, everyone that's engaged, that I've engaged with about this, that's more the issue. I think this is, people are pretty understanding, follow legislation, that sort of stuff. But in terms of consumption, are we planning on going back and asking that question next, or what's the strategy around that?
Around consumption, and within the survey, we did put the provincial framework regulations within the questions. So we just didn't put a question there for people to answer, so that information was there. The province has put forward, in terms of their cannabis framework, some fairly restrictive in terms of legislation on cannabis, and will be matching smoking, and actually takes it a bit further. So it includes, so basically from a bylaw perspective, we'll be able to include tobacco, we'll be able to include vaping, we'll be able to include any form of cannabis within that framework. Now, where it gets a little bit more dicey is what I think Mr. Hagan was talking about within his 3 recommendations, was ban in all public places. However, the second recommendation there was to have some public areas where people may be able to, and that may be smart, actually, smart or best practice, because once this kind of starts to happen and roll out, we're going to be seeing a lot of court challenges across Canada, and basically the lawyers are going to make a lot of money over a very long period of time until they get that system correct. We have to kind of remember, alcohol, it was illegal to drink and drive in 1923, but until they got the tools in place through the late 70s into the early 80s, that's when the people started to get actual impaired fines and stuff like that, because they were able to get to that point. So getting back to the original question there, is that we have to pretty much take a fairly restrictive view of this, because our police officers and our bylaw officers aren't going to be able to tell what someone's doing when they're driving by. So we're going to be bringing forward a fairly restrictive bylaw based on what other communities are bringing forward.
So I guess the question though that keeps getting put up in front of us is, ban tobacco vaping in all public spaces. Do we think about, is that part of the plan to ask? I get there's a bunch of research behind it, and before you answer the question, you talked about, someone who's got a medical license. I have a right to be able to, go and buy a bottle of beer, but I can't walk down the street and buy it, and drink it. So there is, I get the lawyers are going to be involved in this for eternity, but it is part of our plan to ask them that simple question. What are your thoughts on banning smoking, tobacco, vaping, weed in a public place? Were we planning on asking that? And if not, then it's okay. But I just was trying to get what's the next steps on this?
Yeah. We weren't planning on asking the question because we really are very limited at what we can do. So even if we asked the question and the public said, no, we want to allow this, this, and this, we may not be able to achieve that based on the framework that we're given from the province. So we could ask the question, but what our risk is kind of like the question that we had about, the distances and setbacks and stuff, when we create a situation where the public's asked for 500 meters, where we probably won't be able to do that. So it's the same thing with we really struggled with this with the question on consumption, is that the framework is pretty limited to what we can and cannot do. It's going to be the question of, do we provide anywhere that they can do it? And I was just basically going to let this kind of seeing what other places were doing, and we can't bring forward our bylaw update until they give us a legalization date, because that bylaw will have to come and affect that date. So we'll have additional conversations, but I was not going to bring forward a survey question on that.
I guess I'm a little confused. We've had 2 people come forward and say, hey, you should, including one who advocates and said implement these policies, you should ban it all in all public places. You're telling me we can't do that? No, we can. So what I'm saying is the Alberta framework is pretty limited to what we can do. So they have set a framework that is pretty restrictive for allowing people to smoke cannabis or tobacco in public places. So it's pretty much, I think they've only kind of left it open to people with medical licenses, but there's communities that are taking that forward and saying no to that as well. And your private property is your private property, but public spaces are public spaces.
Okay.
Just to follow up to that, Calgary Council passes bylaw prohibiting marijuana consumption in public type thing. So Calgary's done that. So now it's going to be, now there'll be challenges, I think, you know, to that and whatever else. So maybe we get the benefit of some of their lawyer money that's spent to see what the back end looks like. So yeah, and this was an article April 5th, so pretty recent.
Right. Okay. Anything further? See nothing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3F, our Centerville presentation. And at this point, I'll declare a pecuniary interest. Step out. Turn the gavel over to Your Worship. Okay. Thank you.
Whenever you're ready. Thank you, Council members and Your Worship, for the opportunity to make an update to you on our Centerville project. I'm controlling this one, right? Oh, so you have the. So the project is targeted at providing guidelines, creating local investment, diversifying Beaumont's assessment base through the redevelopment and redevelopment of the historic and cultural heart of the community. The project includes 4 deliverables. The first one is the review and update of the Central Area Redevelopment Plan. The second is the review and update of the French Village Design Guidelines. And Beaumont has a design guidelines actually since 1980s and was amended in 2013. And this is an update that is required to address new opportunities for other land use districts and to make the guidelines more developer-friendly and easier to use in the community. The third deliverable as part of the project is the creation of the Economic Development Framework, which initially will be focusing on business retention and business expansion initiative in the Centerville area. And the second is to expand it to the other parts of the town. And the fourth element is the development of a parking strategy to address the concerns about parking in the area. A project charter was approved back in September last year that includes the governance structure, approval process, the project team structure, and change management, etc., etc. And a consultant team led by ISL Engineering and Land Services was selected through a very competitive request for proposal process back in 2017. The project is anticipated to cost around $389,000 through the 2017 and 2018 budget, and also it includes $150,000 from the Community and Regional Economic Support, the CARES grant from the province. So what is the Central Area Redevelopment Plan? So actually the plan was first approved back in the 1986. And for the purpose of to provide a framework for encouragement and guiding development and redevelopment in the central area over the next 20 years. Then that was between '86 and 2006 to attract major business, social, cultural, entertainment focus on the community. The 1986 plan implementation highlights physical development where suitably located and serviceable land areas will be designed and existing and prospective developments will be managed. It also promote economic development which market the central areas, service activities and opportunities to prospective users. Implementation of the 1986 plans include the adoption of the French Village Design, the theme for the central area, and a 5-year review cycle. In 2009, because of the economic, social, and political context, that requires an update to the 1986 plan. So the plan actually, the 2009 plan included a lot more public open space and civic and institutional users in the area. And also the 2009 plan expanded the area from 28 acres to 44 acres. 2009 plan include a new vision for the area, new land uses, particularly the town center mixed use and the live work area, and the implementation through the land use bylaw, through the French Village design guidelines, streetscape design and improvement, and the potential of developing a business revitalization zone. Since 2009, there have been major accomplishment for the last 7-8 years. So, for example, the new TCMU, the Town Center Mixed Use District, was incorporated. The French Village Design Guidelines was updated. The Live Work District was created. The 50 Streets corridor upgrades, as you can see on the 50 streets there, and there are several temporary parks developments there. There is ongoing streetscape implementation on 50th Avenue as we speak today, and there are several things that are still ongoing implementation. That's to give you a snapshot of what is happening in our Central area today. And we have 7% of the area are parks and open space. We have 70,000 meters square of building footprints in the area, 66,000 road and municipal boulevards in the areas, so forth and so on. So what's happening in 2018? We try to basically several factors that affect the update now is because of the new Edmonton Metropolitan Growth Plan. They call for a density ratio of aspirational targets of 100 units per net residential hectares in the urban core. And also there are new best practices in the planning arena since 2009. And we want to make Centralville area a welcoming and attractive space. And we want to revitalize downtown to promote the economic development, not only in the Centralville area, but also other parts of the town. And that is all these factors basically initiate us to update the plan this time. The project timelines, it is to give you a highlight of the project time frame. The project started basically as we hired the consultant back in December 2017. We started the process already. Through January to March this year, initiation and planning work has been completed. We are in the currently at the execution stage, and that will carry through the fall of 2018. Beginning summer to the fall, we are finalizing the plan and come to the council for approval, and then we will start the monitoring and implementation process. So we will come back to the council on an ongoing basis. Just to give you a snapshot of what's been completed. Phase 1, as I mentioned, it has been completed. So basically, there are several things that happened the last several months. Smart startup workshop, including the consultant and internal stakeholder groups that includes the administration, held in January of this year. So we have a public engagement plan developed. That is what the department, the town is using. We participated in the spring community awareness event to promote the project and make awareness to the public that there is a project ongoing together with the land use bylaw update. And the consultant has completed a background brief and what is called the SOAR, SOAR, the Strength, Opportunity, Aspiration and Result Assessment Report for the area. And
Fancy SWOT.
And phase 2, phase 2 also completed. Basically, we had the first design charrette for the stakeholder groups, the land developers, the business owners, on April 10th. And on April 11th, we have a charrette that is to come up with some concepts, for discussions. On the same evening, we had an open house for the general public, held at the AgriFit Center. So on May 5th, couple weekends ago, we participated in the Communities in Bloom, just another awareness event. So we have a lot of people walking by and a lot of conversation. We collected very much good feedback for us to take back to work on the design. So what's next? Tomorrow there will be the second charrette with the land developers, and tomorrow evening there will be also the public open house for the general public to provide their feedback. And there are several other items that are listed there, and we are also engaging, that is on the list, with the youth center. We are going to have a workshop actually on May 23rd. We're just lining up with the youth center to work with the youth in the town to talk about the aspiration in the Central Vale area. And also we are working with the schools, the 2 schools, and actually this morning we are contacted by one of the school principals and to potentially have an opportunity to work with the students over there for getting some input from the students there. In the fall of 2018, there will be another design charrette and a public open house to test the ideas of the concept of the new the ARP, the area redevelopment plans. So, and that's my presentation to you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Appreciate the quick update. I guess I'll start off. I got a couple questions. We had an update today about the land use bylaw, and they were talking about a form-based code and design guidelines being incorporated into the code. So I guess my question is, knowing that the Saunterville plan and the land use bylaw are very closely related, and we're updating the French Village design guidelines, what's sort of the intention with that? Is that sort of to center those on Saunterville only and let the form-based code take care of the rest of town, kill them and integrate them, or where are we going?
Yeah. The ARP actually is a policy document, and that will inform, the more concrete with the regulations on the land use bylaw. So that is how the plan level, the hierarchy of plans. So basically, the ARP, like I said, is a policy document. It will set the stage and what the direction council wants to, basically how the Central Vale area will be redeveloped. For example, I'm just hypothetically speaking, if this area is for mixed use, for example, in the future, and then there will be some policy statements as to how and what is desirable. And then the LUB will basically put it into regulations and for the development officers to evaluate the applications later on. So any additions?
Didn't quite answer my question.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart there. So with the French Village Design Guidelines and the Land Use Bylaw, what we are going to be doing is there has been some preliminary discussion about how those guidelines are going to continue to exist. Right now, they apply to all multifamily, residential, commercial, industrial, and buildings within town, all over town. There's more stringent guidelines that are within Saunterville and then less stringent guidelines throughout the rest of the town. But that does mean that our new industrial lands currently need to be French villaged, which has a whole roof pitch and different things like that. So we're trying to figure out how we can best do that. So one of the things that the land use bylaw is looking at is public realm guidelines and some different things with the potential for the hybrid code and that sort of thing, but it won't apply everywhere within the town. So some of those ones will be more of that traditional zone, and then some of that will be with the form. And then the French Village guidelines, we're still planning on existing in some form because it provides more clarity to that process, and then also that interpretation, which is something that's lacking in those current guidelines. So it's our intention that they will still exist, but that the regulations will be a little bit more specific in the land use bylaw itself for how the building would actually be developed, and then it's oriented within the site. It just helps inform that.
Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not proposing we get rid of the French design guidelines, but I just don't want to see 3 competing documents that we're trying, part of this process, we're trying to reduce confusion. I'd rather see them gone in.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Your Worship. Just to clarify, I think Joannis was trying to go down this role here too. So if we're talking about hierarchy of plans, you've got your municipal development plan, you've got area structure plans, area redevelopment plans, next level down in detail, and then your land use bylaw is on the street that's what you do, and how far the fence is away from the house kind of thing, right? So the area redevelopment plan is what are the council policies of what we want to see in Centreville. So there should be no conflicts between municipal development plan, area redevelopment plan, and those really detailed rules of how we're going to get there. And then the French Village, they just kind of sit out around there because they're guidelines. So a little different than policy versus land use bylaw.
Fair enough. That's all I wanted to know. Any other questions from council? Councilor Van Niekerk.
Just some, I guess, feedback on side conversations that I've heard. So first of all, I think that I know that the level of engagement and the effort you guys are going through, I don't know how or why, but it seems to me that people are more engaged with this. I don't know if this is just my perception, they're more engaged with this than the land use bylaw. Maybe because there's more opportunity for input and visioning, I don't know what it is. But just to share a couple of the side conversations I heard at the Spring Awareness event and the feedback session at the Aquafit that I attended. Whenever someone sees a map with their house or home on it or business on it that has someone penciling a big X through it and saying public structure, park, whatever else, the comments I heard were, but we live there. What are they going to do? Who's going to do this? And, while I understand the intent of it, maybe people don't always understand the intent. So I think that just something to keep in mind throughout the process in the public engagement piece that, this is a visioning exercise for the future. If we look at the conversation around childcare, I'll say it now, we bring up the conversation around childcare. Now we have 130 some families that are there wondering what's going to happen, 88 people on the waiting list, another 18 over here, so we're impacting all those families. So just for everyone to be cognizant, and I just wanted to make the point that when we make a map and we put a square on it and people draw over other people's houses, people still live there, and they're people's homes, and it's important to think for the future, but it's important to respect the history and the past too. So just a general comment, and I heard a few side conversations around that, and the one group at the Aquafit, I went and kind of talked them through that and explained what the purpose was, because they were quite upset that there was marks in a certain spot. So just feedback.
Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. This could be dreamy and technicolor, but one of the things that would help, I think, council, to look at the economic benefit of the things we've done and the things we want to do. Is there some way to get measurements or general cost? I mean, there's two slides here that lend themselves to it. One is the accomplishments since 2009, and the other one is the next one about how many square meters of building are available, et cetera. I'm trying to get my head around the scale and scope of what's already been accomplished and the businesses we've brought in. Has that actually helped? I'm sure it has, but to what degree has it helped our bottom line? I mean, we're trying to increase the economic development and raise the business taxes, residential 80-20. What impact do these things do right on the ground and in the bottom line? Not to be crass and take away from all the other good things in terms of how the quality of life, but do we do any measurements like that? Can we do any measurements like that so that we can quantify the work we're doing?
Thank you. Some of the measurements that have been taken in the past as part of the strategic plan monitoring have actually taken into account, how many new businesses and that sort of thing, and what's our assessment value, and how much new assessment have we generated over time. So it's definitely something I know that I've talked with about internally, is how we can actually report on that and whether, some of the successes that we've had with that plan and where what's it's actually generated, so we can take a look at that and then have that information available for sure.
Because again, thinking to the future, some of the changes that'll be proposed or the recommendations, I think if you can put some kind of a cost benefit to that, it's a lot easier, to explain it to citizens and to council.
And actually on the April 10th, there was a workshop held with the business community, and actually there was one question that the consultant asked the business community was, what were the good news for the last couple of years in Beaumont? And we've heard there was some particularly in the central Vail areas. But for example, those 2 new buildings that were built in the last couple of years, and one of the big comments was that French restaurant, right? So basically, yes, we can quantify that, and we've heard, through discussions with the business communities, with the residents in the area, there are good things happened for the last while, but we have to basically quantify that.
On that, there's the investment side, and then there's the, and there's a cost.
Yep.
But has the benefit exceeded that? I hope it has, but it'd be nice to be able to demonstrate.
Okay. Any further questions from council? Because this is only a 15-minute item.
Yeah, I just have one statement just to say is that we are just beginning our online engagement on this project. So just like the land use bylaw has an online engagement portal, we'll be plugging in the central area redevelopment plan, the Centreville stuff onto that as well. Land use bylaw is just starting, which is why you're not seeing probably as much uptake into the public engagement conversation yet, but we definitely are going to be increasing that as well. So just early stages on that.
Are there any last comments from council? Fair. Thank you very much for recognizing that this is early stages. We really appreciate the update and look forward to continued updates ongoing. Can somebody go grab Councillor Hendricks?
I can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Oates.
So it's 7:44.
We're not doing food. We're going to power through. We're done in an hour.
Well, an hour. That means it's 9 o'clock. We've been here since 5, right? I'm not the one who put the agenda. This next conversation is going to take a long time because I've got so many things I want to go through. So I know we can take a vote. I'm happy to lose. But if we're going to be here till 9.
We can't be stopping every meeting like this. I mean,
I completely agree. We should have it scheduled, didn't it?
7 presentations, it's obvious it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, there was a timeline there. So I don't want to keep reacting to that. I mean, I know other people have mentioned it. I just hate, I'm the only guy who brings it up, and I'm a bad guy, but people are hungry, and so we need to figure out a strategy on how we go about this going forward. If you want to keep going, fine, but we can't just keep doing this every month and then getting hungry and then be 9 o'clock before we're out of here, starting at 5, right? No one sits for a 5-hour meeting, a 4-hour meeting like that. A break, but if going forward we need to
Can we deal with now and deal with that at another
Yeah,
time?
so
Because
if that's-
I'm with Sam and the mayor and yourself. I don't know, I didn't get a sandwich.
Right.
I'm hungry.
Right.
And I didn't think we'd be going past 7 until I looked at the agenda and realized there's no way.
Yeah, and I saw the agenda and I also sort of decided, we probably got a late one here, so. Yeah, so I don't set the agenda, which is part of the initial strategy issue.
Yeah, we're gonna crack the procedural bylaw and look at agenda committees and other things. So
yeah, but maybe it's Tuesdays. But Mr. Danick.
Mr. Chairman, I recall the budget time in my enthusiasm to be a responsible new councillor, thinking meals aren't really necessary. We only have an hour or 2 meeting. I thought it was fiscally responsible, so I could grab a sandwich, whatever. But our last few committee of the whole meetings have been extremely effective and extremely long, which I did not forecast in my vote back in the budget time to say get rid of the meal thing. So I'm of the opinion going forward, if not just this evening, that to me, the whole meeting, we should be supplying supper for our administrative people who are here and our council ourselves. And I'm happy to reverse my vote on that if it comes to that, because I did think it was responsible at that time, but we meetings have become longer than I thought they would ever be. But they're good meetings. They're great. That's why we're here. But I think any reasonable person out there would say, more than 2 hours, we should feed you guys and our administrative people. That's just how I feel.
Right. So to go back to that, if I can, just the previous council, I had the same problem because dinner was at 4 and you pulled in here at 5. And so you were never part of that meal. I didn't have one meal with council, given that I just can't get here by 4.
Nor can I.
Sit here and eat to be ready for 5. So that was a problem. I always question why are we at 5? Why aren't we just at 7? And just carry this meeting the same, but have it every Tuesday. Right?
I'm inclined to agree. That would give us all time to...
Because like we're accommodating some
Doesn't
people
deal
on
with today.
Thursdays, some of us have other things on
We need to deal
Tuesdays,
with right now.
that if we can get out of here at 2 hours, we can go do.
Yeah, let's go back to my Thursdays, and
Let's deal with that now.
and I've heard that. It's pretty simple for me. There was a organizational meeting that set it up for Tuesdays, and I made my whole world around that. And I've signed contracts, I've spent money, I've done all sorts of crazy things to make it all happen. But if now there's a push, and I feel like there is, to start switching it into Thursdays, then my attendance will be limited here, because I can't get out of all these other commitments I've made based on the commitments that council said they were going to take, which is Tuesdays. And I keep hearing about Thursdays now. That doesn't work for me at all, nor will it. So, and we've had other council agendas canceled because we said, well, we didn't have anything for that day, the council meetings, right?
Which brings me to my next point. I think that to solve this is we got to get a grip on the agenda, so it's shorter.
Yeah.
And have an extra meeting on a Tuesday.
Well, that's what I said, like if instead of having to skip Tuesday, you just continue to use Tuesdays as your meeting night.
Can we get something for now and make that decision on Tuesday?
We can just, we'll continue this discussion on next Tuesday, but I'm personally for just powering through and getting out of here, but.
Okay, so are we at the meal or don't eat stage? Is that what the discussion is?
That's where we're at now,
Okay,
yes.
Right now,
We're here to talk about
decide if we have a
tonight.
break or not?
Yeah, so at this point, what do we do? Who needs something to eat? Sam's going to put the parish, everybody else.
Well, he's not the only one.
No, that's what I'm saying. I asked, is there anybody else? I didn't set up the rules. So what are the rules? This is not a council that makes decisions, it's a consensus group. So in terms of this room, this meeting, so what do we do? What's the consensus?
I'll start a vote. This hand says 15-minute break, grab bite to eat. Anyone join me?
As long as we're back on the go at 15 minutes and not half an hour because you all left the building.
Somebody figured it out the last time. I don't know where you went, but you came back in 15 minutes.
I'm not sure how I can meaningfully get food in 15 minutes. I'd favour just carrying on until we're done and going and eating when I get home.
That'll be 9:30, and when I go to bed on a stomach like that, it's not a good night.
I understand.
So I'd rather take the break now.
Okay, well, hearing the dietary issues, let's go. Take a
Well,
break.
whatever it takes, I don't know.
15 minutes?
I guess, yep.
We
let's
try
do
for
that.
15 and see what happens.
We can make minutes and back in
Will
15.
you take
Who
orders?
wants?
Okay, we're on. So we'll go to 3G, Aquafit Phase 2, grant application, investing in Canada infrastructure plan. Mr. Hiltz.
Thank you, Chairperson, Your Worship, members of Council. This report kind of happened in two phases. I had written one report based on the announcement of the Investing in Canada infrastructure plan, and that the Aquafit Phase 2 project qualified for funding, and that was open for expressions of interest. After the report was completed, on May 7th, I received a bilateral agreement was sent to me by some contacts of mine that basically outlined that funding for the first 3 years for recreation projects was only going to be limited to $7 million per year, and would be back-ended. So based on the council approval of the Aquafit Phase 2 and the 2018 capital plan, it was with the condition of federal and/or provincial funding being received. In the interim, based on the news that we got from the bilateral agreement, the funding source was really not going to be significant against a $29.5 million project. We will still apply for funding, but realistically, we may receive $500,000, we may receive $1 million, but anything above that will probably be not applicable, given that the province and First Nations or Indigenous communities will receive the lion's share of the $7 million. So what we've kind of outlined from an administrative perspective is on the attachment. A table is created based on a 20-year, a 25-year, and a 30-year annual payment based on a single residential home in Beaumont, and the attachment is based on if we applied no funding, what the annual, general tax assessment would be on each family home. If we just applied the federal gas tax funding, what that would mean, and that actually is quite positive. If we just applied the Leduc County share only, if we applied the Leduc County share with the federal gas tax funding, and if we did just the matching MSI funding with the Leduc County funding, and basically at the end of the scenario we applied full county share if we are successful, full MSI funding, and federal gas tax funding, and basically it shows the different impacts that those will make. In terms of the gas tax funding, that fund has been available now for the past 9-10 years. It's a federal source funding that used to be just available for transit and for certain infrastructure programs. About 3 or 4 years ago, they opened it up to recreation facilities, and some communities do apply it to build recreation facilities. It is a stable fund, and looks like they have it listed moving forward. MSI funding, the town does have about $5.7 million that they can apply. In terms of the stability of MSI, that's still to be known. Leduc County share, if we receive maximum from Leduc County share, that is at $2.7 million. They would pay that out over about a 5 to 10 year period based on their other grants that they're paying out to membered municipalities. In terms of further to the Leduc County, it is based on the population of what they would consider their Beaumont service area, and against our population. So they would have a few thousand people that live around Beaumont against our 18,000 people that get the 9.2% there. And they've also, in terms of moving forward with the Aquafit Phase 2 and Mother Deville Steering Committee, we will also be talking about operational funding dollars for the Aquafit Phase 2 project moving forward as well. So this basically provides some funding sources that are available from the province and from the federal government, and basically any of these decisions we would just basically require to bring it back to council for a further discussion and approval or not approval, and we do not have to go through a future budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hiltz. Mr. Schwartz, anything further?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Your worship.
Just a clarifying question. The chart's up there. Good. Going back to the chart, the MSI funding that we're is that ongoing? Like, we would have to put that much of our MSI funding in every year? Or
No,
is
that's
that
a one-time
shot, and then our payments would be X for a number of years?
So the biggest impact that is made, if you look at the chart, is when we apply federal gas tax funding, because that goes against the annual payment directly each year. So let's say if we were looking at a 25-year scenario. So if we looked at a 25-year scenario and our assessment was going to be 1.759, the gas tax supply of $1 million, it would be $750, which would mean each residential household in Beaumont, on an average assessment, would pay $113. And so that would be against, if we applied nothing, it would be $266 based on 2018 assessed and interest rates and all those kind of factors. It's changed a little bit since last year.
Thank you. Councillor Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, great information here, Kerry. I really appreciate all the effort to go back and show the options for us. It's exactly what I was looking for. I got a few questions, but maybe I want to start with kind of a theme to this. And given the information you've come back with through your sources and all that sort of stuff about 500 grand, maybe $1 million, I think we need to change our approach here. And the comments that Councillor Hendricks makes consistently about the costs going up over time. We should be able to be in a position where we can all go around the room, not vote, but we can go around the room and say, this is kind of what we're comfortable with, because if we are, if we get to a spot where we can, let's not delay it anymore. Like, if we're comfortable with one of these streams and applying this, let's get this going. And so that's kind of the lens that I'd like to have this discussion on today is, at one point, from a budget perspective, we were waiting for the grant from a grant, and hoping to use some leverage. Now that we know that that's kind of folded back a bit, there is a comment that I'll make about the county in a second. But I think if we're comfortable with a certain number here, we're going to be comfortable with that number in a year as we are today. And so you've laid it out so well for us. So I'd like us to think about that as we go forward. I think we can make a decision on this pretty quickly. Would be my sense. So thank you for outlining that. Just the one question I had about the county. So you had indicated 9.2% based on population ratio. From my understanding, that's still up for negotiation. And so, as Council is aware, Councillor Danlock and I are on that committee, and certainly we will be speaking to them about that on, I think, June 14th. I think that's
somewhere in there.
Somewhere there. And so, part of the pitch to them will be obviously all the new residential west of town. And going through some of their documents, they know that they need a new rec centre to feed that population, right? So I think we've got some good arguments there. So 9.2 is good starting percent, but certainly we're going to be trying to negotiate for more on that. So those are just kind of comments I want to lay out there. But I think now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this would be a good chance to say, are we comfortable with these streams? And if so, can we start moving on this?
Yes. Okay. Just further, thank you for those comments and things like that. So further, where we're at is that we're pretty much ready to go. So if council gave the green light at a future council meeting, we would be able to move into the RFP contract stage. And so that would go out to select companies who specialize in building of rec facilities, and basically we would have that out for a period of time as a competitive process, and then we would be able to start that process once council gives it the green light.
If I could just add,
Schwartz.
As Mr. Hills has mentioned in his report, we're going to continue to pursue both federal and provincial funding very aggressively, and he's actually got a very good plan. So that would make any of these numbers look.
This is worst case scenario.
Right.
Yep.
Mr. Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, council members, I'm having a bit of a brain lack of recognition from the past. when we did our budget deliberations back in the fall about Aquafit and we passed our motion for government funding, I don't recall a number of 5.7 million for MSI being available to us to use for Aquafit now. If I missed something, I apologize, but that's a very big number, which I'm very happy to see. I just don't understand, sorry, I said that poorly. I'm glad to see it here now, but I don't know where it was before, and if it was there before and I missed it, my mistake. But I'd like to know how this came into the mix. It's a good thing, but how do we get there?
I'll let Mr. Harris take the first crack at it, I may add.
I'm not being critical.
The number of $5 million, wasn't presented at the last time or available. What that is the remaining amount until the program ends. So so there's another year. So there's 2018 and 2019 what we have carried forward and everything. That's the max.
Yeah, because
you got to remember the province prepaid 2018 and 19 based on the 2017 thing. I won't get into the rationale behind it. But that is the amount that's remaining in the fund.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And we pre-spent, further to that, we pre-spent a year of MSI to pay off the community center. So that's paid off.
Right. Okay. So this is just to make sure I'm clear, and I thank you for the explanation. So this is legitimate money we can as council determine to use to fund Aquafit or other obvious things in our community, but obviously that's a rather large number. And the worst case scenario makes the worst case scenario look a lot better than it did before this. I mean, okay. Thank you for clarifying. I thought there was the reason for it. I wanted to know what it was. Thank you very much.
Okay, Your Worship.
I still have the same mental block from budget, and that's with our borrowing or debt limit. We know we want to do some really cool economic development type things, and we might need to put in some pipelines and some other things. And so if we have to borrow, I don't know, depending on what we do, say $22 million, if we do the full meal deal, what does that do to our debt limit?
You would leave it? Oh, sorry.
And how do we, like, yeah, how does that affect future? Because as much as I'd love to build this, but I don't want to, if I got to be honest, if the choice is between this and a business park, I'd probably go with the business park.
Thank you, Your Worship, for the question. Is that we've through our discussions with the province, our debt limit is 42 million. Originally we thought it was 25 million because they were talking about the 75-25, but the province no longer prescribes that, so they said you can borrow for your full 42. So that would leave us at a $20 million debt limit, which is basically what we thought we had to begin with when we went into this process.
Well, that's new information.
Yeah, it was at the last. We talked about it, I believe, at the.
I asked about it.
Yeah, during the budget meetings we had when we approved the budget. Finally, those were discussed. Yes.
You did ask.
You did ask.
Yeah, sure. Can you say that again, just quickly, what that was?
So basically, originally we had the breakdown was like 39.25, and that was based on basically what we believed was our debt limit. When we went back to the province and we had the discussion with them, they said we no longer prescribe to the 75-25. Your full debt limit is available now, and it's a 42 million, based on what's falling off. And the next couple of years, other things will be falling off as well: the police station, library, stuff like that. So
if I can, just to tackle that issue, because that's one point I wanted to bring up, is there's debt and there's cash flow, and our cash flow is improving. BRAC 2 is coming off.
Yeah.
RCP station.
I think the RCP station's coming off. The library comes off in a couple of years.
It all comes off. So very shortly. In fact, I think this year.
I think the BRAC comes off this year.
BRAC comes off this year.
Good timing.
Right.
So I'm a lot more comfortable than I was 10 minutes ago.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, going back to our past deliberations, so, I've been telling people about Aquafit that I thought comfortably that, assuming we had no government funding of any kind, and except for the county some money, it'd be on the total taxpayer, and I was ballparking that 250 to 270 per household for 25 years, right? Well, if you look at the third last scenario, county grant, matching MSI, federal gas tank, only using half the MSI, not 5.7, using 2.7, that tells me an annual tax amount of $98 per household, which is a lot less than 260, and we still build the entire aquafit. So that's only using half the MSI, to Mayor Stewart's point about not using all the MSI in one basket. So to Sam's point about saying what's our comfort zone, I'm feeling much more comfortable the last 10 minutes I have since November, because not knowing what funding was going to be, not knowing what appetite for tax increases are going to be, these numbers carry, again, thank you for the work. I'm feeling quite more comfortable. I think Mayor Stewart's point, not using the entire MSI, well, for the third column, we'll only use half of it. And we look at a taxpayer at $98 per year, which is much better than 260.
Which column are you looking at?
The third from the right. From the right.
Third from the right. Okay, sorry.
Right, sorry. If I'm reading it right, at 20 years, it's $98 a year. 25 is 64.
Whoa, slow down, sorry. And just to your point, Mr. Vithils wanted to chime in.
Yeah. So I just wanted to be clear to council is that, you know, this information, you know, in terms of how we're bringing it forward, we kind of got through this. We kind of thought we were going to get this opportunity for the other federal funding, and it's difficult. That federal funding is actually against stacking, so we wouldn't be able to apply some of these other funds to it. And when we present a project, and you know, when I present a project to council, and it's going to be a borrowing to $29.5 million. The grants are gravy. I have to look at this from that full amount and the impacts that full amount's going to be. Absolutely. I'm not going to sell you guys saying that, oh, we're going to get this and we're going to apply this and we can do this. Lots of stuff can change, and council has to understand that when we're looking at these projects, we're going against other municipal projects as well. So we want to make sure we're giving you a balanced approach.
Great. Okay, sorry, Sam, go ahead.
Okay, could I ask a question about the grant, the infrastructure grant? This doesn't include getting anything. So my question was going to be, can we still apply and maybe look at something for CCBCC? Because I think that fits the criteria. I mean, it's a big cost coming down that.
Yeah, we can, you know, thank you for that question. It's a good question. We're going to be having the Ken Nickel roof is going to be coming to council. And that's going to be a few-year project. It's going to be very expensive. So that's something you could apply towards that project. Yeah. There's projects, you know, in terms of the Aquafit Center.
We have a long list. I know there's a whole list.
There's other things that we can look at. We have 2 months before the expression of interest is due. It's due August 1st. And so we can have those discussions.
Okay, so I'm going to stay in order here. Sam, next.
I think I'll let everyone else ask questions. I'm ready to go a bit further. So
then it was Bill, then Martin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just sort of a forward-thinking question, if you don't mind. So let's just assume for a moment that we just take one of these options. We vote on it today, argument's sake. We start breaking dirt in 2 months, okay? In my example here of the third from the right.
A little nervous.
Just saying. So if we went with the option of $98 per year per tax-paying household, right, for 20 years in this third from the right scenario. My question is, that's based on the households on that day, right? That's right. So as we build 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 homes in the new areas in the coming 10 to 15 years, do they get tacked on the same $98 everyone else got 5 to 10 years earlier, and that $98 goes towards the principal?
No, it reduces.
Reduces.
You pay less because you have more people paying.
There's more people paying in. This is based on the average.
Only what I'm getting at though, right? If you do your mortgage, right? That's our payment for
today.
Yeah,
that's a payment today.
So as the new household come on board, the $98 per household will be dropping down.
Right.
We can't leave it at $98 and use that money against the principal.
I'm going to let
not if
just trying to find an angle.
Not to be reelected.
There's another way to do this.
I was discussing, I missed what was being said.
I'm not being facetious. I'm just trying to get an idea. So as the town grows and more people will be paying this additional levy, right, for the Aquafit, how does it get applied to our debt?
But it's not a levy.
It's not a levy.
Levy's the wrong word to use, but the lump sum.
Okay, I'll let Mr. Harris.
Well, in regards to the lump sum amount of the debt, it doesn't. What it will do is reduce the amount of taxes being paid by the average person as you grow, and that's why you want to do it on a 20-year basis borrowing, because if we continue to grow the way we're going to grow, that 200, even assume no borrowing, at 260,000, or sorry, no grants, the $260,000 will come down just because of our growth.
Yep.
And so what you can do also in regards to this, you got to remember that it's going to be a 3-year project. You have another unique way of dealing with the federal gas tax, in the sense of, well, we're not paying a lot of, we could potentially borrow internally using our funds to do it, charging interest internally, but using that $1 million a year for the first 2 years against the actual amount to borrow. And so you reduce that borrowing amount too. So there's some strategies that you have to do. Having said that, the most important thing is you can't break ground in 2 months, because you have to still go and before we do anything is do a borrowing bylaw, and I would say do it to the maximum if council is comfortable with that, and then borrow to what we only need.
I was just making that as an example, saying the number of households 2 months from now get this amount per year, and then you roll forward. So that's my point was just saying a moment in time.
Yeah.
Okay, Your Worship, question
about that. If we do the maximum borrowing bylaw, does that clog the debt limit, or does the debt limit only worry about when we actually borrow?
It's yes. The potential is it can clog it because they look at. But the fact that it's what we actually borrow that's outstanding, the concern is that they'll say, is there a potential you may borrow more? And I just have to double check that in regards to whether if we maximize and then, we reduce the amount of the bylaw so that the province is happy, or Alberta Capital Finance is happy. So yes, there is that potential kind of a deal. So it could have an impact of $7 million, assuming that we get 7 million against it, or for grants against it, or 8.5 million if you're going down to 21 million. So yes, there's that potential, but you also have to remember that in 2 years' time, the annexed land is going to come off, and that's $5 million of borrow.
Great.
So there's that timing issue, but that's something I can look into and just clarify to make sure. That's the worst case scenario.
So just with that then, cash flow, that's the issue. And even the construction of this thing over time, you're not paying it you're not going to pay it tomorrow, right? You're going to pay it over time. Right. So by the time 2019, at the end of, potentially you've then written a check. So you had another year and a half plus, right? Sorry. I had Steve, sorry, and then Sam. So go ahead, Steve.
So just a bigger picture question, which I think I would ask so that everyone says yes or no, or laughs at me. Does the town have any assets we can sell to put towards this? When I want to buy something internally, sometimes my wife makes me downsize some things in order to move forward. So I think we owe it to ourselves to say yes or no, just throwing it out there.
Have a town garage sale.
Yeah, per se, like, is there any tangible assets? And if the answer is no, that's fine, but.
Nothing of significance.
Now, sorry if I can, I think I will apologize to Councilor Martin. Stout, you're up next.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to paraphrase what I've just heard there. That since we passed the budget earlier this year, wasn't it?
Yes.
Then we have an extra fund worth 5.8 million, nearly. No? But it wasn't in the budget.
It wasn't presented that way.
It wasn't presented that way.
Okay, so if I may, to the chair, to the rest of the committee. When the budget was done in regards to the Aquafit Phase 2, it was budgeted based on full borrowing at $29.5 million and using the federal gas tax to reduce the amount of the payments in 2019 and 2020, basically, or it was rolled over that period of time based on when we thought we would borrow. In regards to this extra $5 million, it's not an extra $5 million. What it is the presentation that, as it always is, we present what our anticipated borrowing power is going to be, or sorry, MSI grants are going to be at December of 2017 and it projected for 2018. What happened in the interim is the province went and prepaid 2018 and 2019 grants. So effectively they gave us $2.8 million, can't remember the top of the amount, and halved our MSI portion of our grant. There's two portions to the grant. There's a BMTT portion of about 1 million, and then there's a 1.1 million, and then there's the MSI portion, which is about 2.8 million. They halved it, and they gave us 2.8. So now what you have is you take the 2018 amount was increased by 2.8 plus 1.4. So it's complicated because 1.4 related to 2018. And they prepaid the 2019. I have to show you the math. It's bizarre. It's a political, it was a political maneuver that the province did to make it look like they were giving you more money. They front-ended their MSI grant. This is all of the amount that we have available until the end of the program.
But it didn't appear on the 2018.
Because it wasn't
there.
It wasn't available.
Yeah, this came
The province did it after.
This came about in like April, where they prepaid 2018, 2019 grants.
They looked at their budget and had money.
Okay, and on top of that, then we also our budget borrowing limit is also expanded from. Did I hear you say from 25 to 42 million?
Yeah,
so it's a difference of 17 million.
Yeah, so basically what that is in a lot of, first coming here and understand, what a lot of municipalities understand is there's a 75-25 rule, where a lot of municipalities have assumed that you can only borrow up, which we did, you could only borrow up to the 75%, and then the province would step in and make a determination whether you can do the extra 25. So we've always shown it at the 75-25, thinking that we'd have to deal with the province. We had a meeting with some provincial people, brought up the question because of Aquifer 2. They came back and said, no, that doesn't apply. And I'm going, okay, that's news to me based on what I've been told. So I phoned the individual and he said, no, you can borrow 100% of it. And there is no 75-25. Where the 75-25 came in or comes in is with Alberta Capital Finance. They want way more information to come to them once you hit 75%. They're going to ask for more stuff because that is one of the factors that when they look at the the going concern of the municipality is where's your borrowing limit. So that's where that comes in. The province isn't going to stop you from doing it, but they will look at it whether you are a going concern.
So when you say much more stuff,
well, just more documentation.
Filing more information.
Yeah, that's all. But they won't
which
stop
we're able
you.
to do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to understand that that we weren't letting ourselves up for some liabilities I hadn't considered.
No.
So these are both changes that are due to these amounts these extra amounts in each case become available due to changes in provincial policy or fiscal practices.
Change in provincial funding cash flow policy for the MSI, and in regards to it's just an understanding of how the borrowing limit worked. And we're not the only municipality that has that, because in the conversations, he says, I hear that all the time. What do you mean 75-25? You have 100%, you can spend it all. It's when you go over the 100% that you're in trouble.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate the exposition.
Yeah. It's good stuff. Sam, you had one more?
I want to move on with this discussion. So could you lay out the next steps? You talked about a bylaw. What do we need to do in order to bring this back in front of council?
Yes, we would need. Well, the first step was if you guys provide us a little bit of direction tonight about which scenario you like, we'll bring forward a report to a council meeting to move it forward from that perspective, and then that will give Mr. Harris direction on bringing forward the borrowing bylaw based on the amounts and things. We may be able to do it at the same meeting, but we may have to have that recommendation first. We'll discuss that administratively, and then we'll be re-engaging BR2 architects and to move forward.
Would we not just look for administrative recommendation that would come to council?
Yeah, so that's what I mean, though. But I wanted to get a little bit of sense if you guys wanted which one of these columns I wanted to get a bit of sense.
Okay.
Just, you don't have to, it's not a vote. I just kind of want to get a sense so when I bring it, I can kind of frame it.
Start with her.
Okay. I'll ask the dumb question then. Why don't I go for the extreme right-hand column and build this facility with as little cost to taxpayers as I can?
I have an answer.
I'll give you that answer.
I have an answer too.
Okay, so how do you want to tackle this?
I just kind of want to get a sense. Like, I know it's not, I'm not going to be.
question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
the question on the floor was, why wouldn't you? And my answer is, there are plenty of other things that we do fund the MSI, whether the annoying construction out here, that's funded through MSI, right? So there's a whole bunch of other things that we would need to look at funding in order to do this. So that would be the...
So we're back to Mr. Harris for a minute. Go ahead.
So the other thing is in regards to dealing with the county. The county has been reflected as a one-time payment, as Mr. Hillis has indicated that it's going to be over 5 years, which would kind of
skew the
thing a bit, but we can work on that with the same breath. There's, as Councillor Swain indicated, there's no guarantee of what that number is going to be right now. So that's the thing, that's why going to the maximum borrowing is key in regards to then working, where do you want to end up is with regards to how we deal with our grants. We still have to send the grant application into federal gas tax for them to approve. That's number one. So we have to get that approval.
Yeah,
then we go to the borrowing. Now, they may say that we need to do the borrowing power first, and that's a phone call that I will make once I have an idea of how you want to proceed, and just verify that process to make sure we get this moving.
Okay. Steve?
Yes, I respect where admin wants to go, but just a question on process on whether we information tonight versus decision making or moving stuff forward. Just a question on process.
It's information tonight, and then we'll have to bring forward to council for a decision.
So what administration needs is some indication, some direction that you want to provide us. We can come back with all of these options, and then we can debate them at regular council. That's fine. But if there's a way that you're leaning towards 1, 2, or 3, or 4, provide us that direction. If you don't, then we'll come back
with everything.
Councilor Hendricks, we'll bring the whole enchilada back to you at a regular council meeting where we can debate it and make a decision. The idea of putting the borrowing bylaw together will be very difficult under that scenario because we will have no clue what that number will look like.
I think it's just to be more clear, my question was just on providing direction out of this meeting, the process of providing direction out of this meeting, if we were allowed to do that. That's my process question.
We're asking for advice.
Yes.
Like this is advice,
We all might
yes.
have different advice, we're not necessarily taking a vote and giving
that's right.
one, so I think going around.
If you got 1 or 2 options that you want to see come, mention those 1 or 2 options that you like. I don't want to see just one option come back because we made a decision tonight. But yeah, so if you're leaning towards a couple options, let them know, and if there's enough of us with consensus, like on 3 or 4 of them, then or 2 or 3 of them, we'll bring them back.
Okay, do you want to go column by column with show of hands? Is that the better way?
Yeah, we
can do that.
I think
If I may,
can we do a quick round of comments?
Sure.
Mr. Stout asked, why wouldn't he? My only answer to your question would be, is that the last option on the very right uses the entire MSI allotment. I like the idea of having half the MSI being used, which is the column third from the right. That's why I wouldn't, to answer your question, why wouldn't I? I'm just a little more comfortable not using the entire MSI on this. It's in my mind, it's almost found money in a way, just by circumstance, but to use it all in one shot, I'm not sure I want to do that. That's just to answer your question, from my perspective.
Could I ask one clarification?
Sure, please.
Better communicated than my jumble.
And you with the same response as well?
I need to ask a question first. In the motion that we made, we said it was conditional on provincial funding. Did we say new?
No.
Good, because this is still provincial funding.
No, it's both, the provincial and...
So it's different funding, it's still funding, right?
Yeah, so process, do you want us to go column by column? And we just show of hands?
We could do that. The other option is just bring this back with our best guess at 3 scenarios. I'm fine with column.
Okay. Put out then. So column 1, if I can, Your Worship, I'll just say, is there anybody that thinks that's a good way to...
Right?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman? The one that says no grant funding.
No grant funding.
Against our motion.
7.9. Yes to that? No. I see nothing there. Second column, at funding only at 3%. Any yes to that?
I'm going to speak to this one though, is that we will be bringing this one back as a consideration, guaranteed any Leduc County funding. So we can apply MSI, but I'm just going to, that will be one.
Yeah, if they say no.
Right, but let me just try to work my way through the columns, and then we can still beat up.
Sorry.
Let me just work my way through this. So, okay, so column 3 is county grant only. Any appetite for that? Column 4, county grant, federal tax money. Do we have any hands for that? Okay, so there's one. Grant matching MSI. Still don't see anything. County grant matching MSI funding, federal gas. I see all hands for that.
That's unanimous. That's a good start.
So we're a consensus type.
Wrong word to use. Sorry.
Consensus type group.
Sorry.
So I think that's
Consensus. Well, you haven't done the other two. You might get
us too then. County grant, full MSI funding. Have a look at that one.
Good with that, so.
And county grant, full MSI funding, federal gas tax funding.
So why would you not do that one?
Well, because if we do the full MSI funding, that still leaves our gas tax.
Okay, so you're keeping.
So I'm keeping one or the other. Is sort of.
So there we are.
Well done.
I had my hand up for the second last option. So
Yeah,
it should be
3.
Not just 2, thank you. Or
Okay, thank you.
4, I guess.
Well, then I'll put my vote on that one as well.
So the direction is that we want more information on these options.
Yes.
We're not voting.
No, there's no voting.
Whatever we need, we'll bring to the
thank you.
council.
One last item to consider. Are we going to confuse the issue on the night of with 20, 25, and 30? Or can we just say we want to do this in 20 years? I'm personally not going to vote for 30 years, but I might be convinced to go to 25 if you guys got some good arguments, but I prefer to stay at 20.
I favor 20 in all scenarios, so.
And again, we'll look for, the type of recommendation we need. The advice right on that. So.
As we expand, boom, boom, boom.
Can I ask, is that your opinion as well?
Yeah, I want to get out fast. We got massive vote coming. I want to be.
All right, you're asking for consensus, if you'll, forgive me.
Forgive it.
So the consensus is then, that we want to pay it off as fast as we can, and then we therefore go for the 20-year.
That's typically been the strategy in Beaumont.
Because the other thing is I want to build a start building a massive rec center in the next 8 years.
In my logic,
I understand, but I want to know what page everybody's on.
In my logic on that one is, as we are expanding more households, with the idea that those households will help get this amount down, we'll pay it off quicker as we grow. So that path is off, right?
Well, assuming that everything pans out the way that we expect. Yes.
Right, assume.
Okay, so one last wrap up, and I'm getting that, Sam.
I'm just curious on where you are with 20, 25, 30, just based on your
20's fine.
experience. Okay.
Yeah, 20's fine. Yeah, 20's been the typical for Beaumont, so. Okay.
All right.
Okay, then thank you for that. Then next item up is an in-camera item. We're going to go through the information items first?
Yeah.
So, okay, we've talked about the Business Summit. We talked about sound system community, but maybe you want an expanded discussion on that?
Just a tweak on that, where it came from was we were at the luncheon on Friday, and I noticed the sound system was being a rental sound system. So it got me just thinking, I didn't know the process was, we had approved budget money for a new sound system, but I didn't know how soon the approval got the proper person to arrange the sound system to be quoted, installed, and so on, where we were down on that spectrum, And it got me thinking one step further was that, how do we politely request from administration that when we have approved certain items in our budget, for example, like the washroom down by Four Seasons, or this example of the sound system, how can we ask administration to let us know, okay, remember that thing you approved back in November? It's now at this stage or this stage. I'm not too sure when was aware. I'm sorry?
That's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, I'm not too sure when the community center was aware the money was approved for the sound system and how fast they got that ball rolling. Like it's already middle of May already. I was anticipating it would have been done by now. Assuming they were told in November, money's been approved, get on your horse and get it done. But I'm not being critical. I want to understand the process.
So the members of council, the process is once budget has final approval, we'd move forward the RFP process.
Okay.
So that wasn't until the end of March. So basically, we're looking at, we're completing the RFP right now, then that will go out to bidding, And then, so the intent is to have it installed in 2018, but it is a several month process to do these things when we get to those, these kind of projects. When we're looking at the washroom and things like that, the parks equipment went out first, the trees are going out right now, and then the washroom and stage are next. So we have to kind of manage our workload too with the staff that we have to do this. So there's a lot of work to an RFP process. It's not just kind of like one sheet of paper and send it out now. We have to be very careful because of all the legislation around formal quoting that's over $50,000 to $75,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So very, very similar, but I've written a couple of pages about this, but I'll just cut to the chase. There's a lot of projects that you guys are dealing with, a ton of them. And council, I don't think, is hearing on a regular basis where they're all at. And I don't mean all the specifics, but just some idea, like a dashboard, because it's a ton of stuff right now that you're dealing with. And I feel for you, because it's like, it's all going on at the same time. You must have a way of managing it, I'm sure you do. But from a council perspective, I just don't see the whole range of them in a way that gives me comfort. I can't even remember what all was asked for. So I know there's ways of doing that. We've had ways in the past of reporting on project updates.
Yep.
It's a PERT chart, or it could be any kind of ways, but if we've had it, I haven't seen it yet.
Right. Short.
The question I would have is, quite frankly, where is the governance piece in there? Like, why do you need to know that information?
Well, it's a monitoring role, and I think we're saying for the same reason that the question was just asked. We don't want to get in and micromanage. We just want to kind of know where it is, whether it's ahead of schedule, on schedule, behind schedule. It's just an overview, an oversight in the positive way, not to micromanage you. It's just that I can't keep track of all the projects that are going on right now.
Right, and that's my question, is why would you need to? I'm just struggling with understanding that. And I'm not saying I have the right answer.
The questions come to us, and so we kind of, we asked for that, but do you want to be bombarded with questions one-offs all the time?
I would prefer them to go through that request tracker, because then we can track them. And I'm thinking out loud here. I'm not aware of a reporting system.
You want council to go through the request tracker?
No. If somebody's asking you, didn't we approve of this, please fire them to us, and we can direct them. We can look at some sort of
If I want to know, I have to bother you on each individual project. And I'm saying, if you're keeping track, why wouldn't you just keep track?
Well, we have each different division keeping track and managing their projects. This is just new to me, that's why I'm questioning.
If it's not, but it worked for me in the past, and it gave me great comfort to see all of these things, and it also helped me to understand what the administration is dealing with on your plate. And it kind of puts off some things where you don't have to then say every time, well, I don't have enough resources, look at all the things we've got going on.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like that in the past, that's why I was asking that question.
Terry knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, so we used to get a quarterly report, and it would just have project, budget, have all the line items done, underway, postponed until next year.
Red, yellow, and green.
That's probably not that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's difficult, and I think it would actually help us and help you to have a sense of all that's on the plate. It's a huge amount.
I wasn't aware of that in the past.
So Bill, I'm just going to give you that, and then we'll wrap up.
Very, very quick question.
Yeah.
More of an observation, I guess, because looking back at our budget process, it was my first time doing it, as many of you obviously was, but there were 4 or 5 or 6 items we really had a lively debate about, which one of them was the sound system. Yeah. So I only thought, here I am sitting in the center going, ooh, sound system. Then it tweaked my mind saying, oh, where's that at? Yeah. And that's how it kind of came about. Right. I guess what I'm suggesting with Kathy is perhaps if we could not identify, but looking back on it, there were 4 or 5 or 6 items we really debated healthfully at the budget process. It'd be nice to kind of get an idea how those things are moving along during the spectrum of the 2018 budget year, that those items were debated on, voted on, approved, and they were actually bona fide projects, either purchase this or do this. Again, not to micromanage, that's not the last thing I want to do is that. It kept in my mind because I'm in the community center, sound system is being rented. I thought, I thought we had that done now. Okay. That's how it kind of came to mind.
So just in interest of time, it is 9:05, and we still have a guest who's been very patient. So I think we better move into the next item.
Okay, we're good.
So thank you. Yeah.
I have a question before we move into that. I have my own information. At the May 8th meeting, again, I wasn't here, so bear with me. But I did have a chance to look at the tape, and one of the things it talked about is this public consultation process. So on the May 8th meeting, there was direction to be provided. So I want to share administration's assumption of what we're about to do, just to check that with council. It'll take just a second. So again, if somebody wasn't here on May 8th, we are going to organize at least 2 public conversations with council. And then on June 12th, we're going to bring a report back to council documenting that these public conversations occurred and looking for next steps. This is to do with the city versus town. Administration will not be attending these sessions, nor will we be keeping records of conversations with council. This, from our perspective, is for individual councils to hear from members of the public in preparation for the June 12th council meeting. Now that's what I'm gleaning from the information that I got from out of that meeting. I just want to double check that before we push the button and start organizing these things, because we got a short time frame.
I don't recall us saying we didn't want the administration to be part of it.
Well, from administration's perspective, we don't want to be part of it, as this is a strictly political decision. This has got nothing to do with if we had facts or figures or something that we could support it with. I'm certainly prepared to be there.
But all I'm saying to you is we didn't hear that.
Okay.
I didn't.
Then that's what I'm gleaning from the information that we've received.
And I in fact said at the meeting that I think the administration is the one who handles consultation based on council's direction. So I wasn't leaning in that direction at all.
That's why I'm asking this.
Good question. Sorry.
Hey, Sam.
That was, so I think that we did have that discussion. You disagreed with it, and I think that's fine. Obviously, it's fine. But I think the comment that I made was that if we're going to be asking for time, this is a chance for, because we're not asking questions, there's going to be no formal, hey, what do you think about this or not from the administration. This is purely just a chance for us for council to engage with residents. That's how I saw it. I know you disagreed, but I think that's where you're coming from. So,
did we vote on it?
No, it was. Yeah, so it was just it was unanimous to 7-0 to do more engagement. I tried to reword the motion to take administration out of it, and it wasn't successful because then you made your amendment to say they'll come back on the 12th with the information that these meetings happened.
Well, and they were just to support our efforts. So basically, do us the frequently asked questions chart and the timeline.
Yeah,
we're going to do
some history stuff.
Yes.
So,
sorry.
Yeah.
Here I'm going.
Thank you. Just quickly.
I'm sort of agree. I'm sort of where Sam was at. Like they book us some rooms, do us some charts, and support us administratively that way. Maybe help us set up, tear it down. But that's sort of where we start leaving it.
No, that's fair. So
yeah.
Get enough?
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Good stuff. I don't know if you're comfortable with that.
I don't, but I'm overruled.
So what would you like?
Majority.
No. But what would you like? Because I mean, there's your chance. So what would you like to see
Well,
from the
I
administration?
don't like to see us as kind of like, when you say it's a political decision, to me it's a town decision, which the administration is part and parcel of. So somehow this has now been relegated to it's something different. It's not part of our usual consultation process. It's something different. Now, we have a public consultation policy, we do things a certain way, or if we're changing that, that's fine. But it's kind of, I'm just seeing council going off doing its thing, which then there will be nobody there recording that, there will be nobody kind of making sure we don't say or do the wrong thing, according to whatever bylaws we might be. I just don't see us as being separated that way. But,
so you're looking for someone to more record the feedback?
I don't distrust the administration in this process. I think
no, we're just trying to get an idea
to work with us.
What do you want them to do? Facilitate, get the information?
Well, if they're presenting the information and they're there, I don't know, it doesn't have to be a lot of staff there.
That's how we got to that decision, is there's no information to present. If we had
just ask for some charts or something.
We're going to put the timeline on the board and the FAQs that are on our website on the board.
That's
the history the history that of all the stuff that we did last year.
Just redo
like the survey and the blah blah. It's less than a year ago.
I think I'm going back that far.
Oh, you're going to go back there? We've already put it out there.
That's why I wanted to have this conversation, because I'm slightly confused about it as well. I didn't see it as a full-blown public consultation. It was, from what I gleaned from the information, I saw it as a conversation for council with the public, the opportunity for Joe Public to come in based on all the information that's been out there in the last number of weeks, months, whatever you want, and share information. I didn't see any need to record any information because how could one person's opinion now be representative of the whole community when we're not asking? There's a chance for this 7 people to gather information so that on June 12th, make a decision to make.
I'm repeating myself, but that wasn't what I suggested. We do a consultation the way we usually do consultations, and the administration comes. Here's what we suggest. This is our did I not say that that day?
Yep.
I think I did.
Yep.
Okay, but what? I didn't see that in any of
Well, as Sam has explained to you, you know, there was the wording of the motion, which had 2 different words added in. I took those words to mean with administration, meant that administration was going to be supporting the effort. So I didn't envision 2 meetings where we sit in a room and whoever comes talks to us, and we have no way of counting that. We have no. Then I say, what's the point? What's the point of that? I can't measure any of that feedback. Wins? I mean, I don't get that. A consultation is measured. Policies, it's done open, transparent, and my opinion was it didn't bring out the people. We had 600 people answer the cannabis survey. We had 200 in the one we did. For a reason. So I thought, do over. Let's see what happens this time. But if what happens this time, that's what I would support. But I'm not going to be able to say I can hold anything from 2 meetings that some.
People came out, unfortunately, to our council meeting to opinion on a night that the town was fully aware a vote was going to be taken that evening. Came out.
I was not clear on that. I'm sorry. I was not.
I understand.
The motion was not clear.
I understand. So I think council made a prudent decision, and the motion was defeated. We did go the other option to engage another month of public consultation. Come on to see us. If we put 2 nights out there, what more can we do?
Are we going to measure it? By the number of people who show up? Are they going to vote?
Well, I'll be happy to, and very honestly, say if I talk to 10 people and 10 people tell me no, I'll tell council.
In this corner talking to some people, and I'm over in this corner, and we just compare notes. It's not transparent and it's not credible.
How would you? But I think what we need is how would, and I know you're going to go.
We've done it before.
So last time they did open houses.
No, well, last time we had a survey.
Yeah.
But the was this annexation piece from Edmonton when they said, you want to become a city? No, a lot of people thought, Edmonton.
The city.
Or the city of Edmonton. Or there was a lot of confusion. So, and you brought that up at the meeting the other you know, that survey I thought was fairly definitive, and it brought out, like you say, the cannabis package got more hits than this. Yeah, so we need to go out maybe with that same package, with the same FAQs, right? And get that result back and see where it takes.
Yeah, so it's not the direction I received, so that's why I'm putting it back on the table.
We only got 3 weeks left to do this. Because we promised that we promised a decision on June the 12th. Together. My problem is the whole problem with this is we couldn't drum up support. We couldn't drum up people to participate last. We've gotten minimal interaction this year. Like, beat this horse.
But we made that decision. We said we were going to consult.
Right, and part of the package on even bringing it forward was that we were going to go out and consult. Yes, we're going to make a motion. Yes, based on a consultative type of process. And I was okay with, if that's the motion, consultative piece to it. Wow. And so we know that we had, last council had it brought before us. We had these survey results, which had all these filled up in it. We said, well, this wasn't clean, this wasn't good, and we dropped it. That out, I think. What's the harm in surveying people with the same, really, go with the same survey, ask the same under these conditions. We know that Edmonton is no longer putting, right? And people aren't confused by this whole process. Well, it's such a huge decision that I think we got to find and get it done properly. So, sorry, just carry.
Yeah, just members is we did talk at the last meeting that we were not going to serve period. We'd never be able to do something and be able to have it represented in that. We did talk about a couple surveying process. Re-listening to the tapes and stuff, I did say at the end of the thing, being in the administrative chair, was that administration would do the setup and that's basically, that was worded from the administrative perspective. If the difficulty we have in this situation from an administrative perspective is that, do we go out and we ask the blunt question, the town of Beaumont is a city? Let's talk. Because that's basically what that is. And so this is the difficult thing that we have, is like, where are we on that spectrum? And so that's why we wanted you guys to have the opportunity to be able to have these discussions. And we have to trust those open and honest discussions. When it comes back on the June 12th, that debate can happen. The direction, how it works, but it was a very, we've had a pretty lively discussion ourselves as administration on this one.
Because I got to admit, my understanding was we're going to go out, we're going to do some public conversations, we're working on a survey. This is administration was going to support us by booking it, doing us some materials, a letter.
Yeah, and it gives us it gives us as councillors more time to go out. We talked about a letter from you going out with the mail to say this is your councillors, so that it's not just the small. We think social actually not. So we need to make sure that people could have it in front of them. So that was an option, but it was just. The encouragement, though, is to direct your conversations, because there isn't a question, direct your conversations with council. That was what I understood as the part of the process.
So you could do a mailer with a self-addressed coming back to this chamber. Send them to the website with all the questions and answers that are tied to it, and just with an ask, yes or no, and put it back in the mail to us. We've done that in the past, and that's been fairly simple.
I've said my piece on yes or no, where they go and all that sort of stuff. Historic, statistically.
TikTok. It's been a week since we had the conversation. I've continued to ask people. I've continued to engage. I hope the rest of us have too.
Yeah, but just the sense that I have of it, right or wrong, is all these years in this chamber. You got it. It's the will of the people. It's not. And this is a big question for a lot of these. Not everybody, but for a lot. They want to be able to chime in. So how do you chime in? The reaction I've got, people I've seen in other quarters, but are they going to be the ones that walk their way down to the Aquafit and make their case? Probably not. They're just going to be mad. Does that mean they're wrong? Or they got to put more energy into it to prove that they're wrong? They've made their case. Next question. So we should have put that on the ballot. But we haven't. Now we're going to do a consultation process, sort of. Survey. No. So really you're not giving people a voice. This political business is fraught with peril. Really. So I would say that's because people don't appreciate that. They voice. So I said, well then give them a voice somehow. Let them speak. Got emails. Significant emails. So
is that not them speaking? But not all of them. But there's the people that I speak to. Everyone's out there enough that if they, I agree with you, we give them their chance to speak.
Right.
And I think we've provided them with, to give them a chance to speak. I think that's, I mean, that's...
So what's the harm in that? I think administration should just come up with something that allows these people to speak. And then...
I think the vision of forward is an opportunity to do that, right? You know, a couple of events and people can come on. It doesn't preclude people from continuing to reach out. It doesn't preclude us from reaching out to folks, from talking to individuals in their various groups and at the sidelines of the soccer game and those types of things. You know, it allows people a voice.
Can we send the mailer?
Good.
It goes out to every household in town, and then that tells them
Something in writing.
come talk.
I'm good with that. Send them a mail, say, you know, we're considering this. I think as a leader in the community, I think you need to put your position forward, but then say these 7 councillors and here's their phone numbers, here's their email, happy to meet, and we're responding to every single email and phone call that we get.
And you can mail it back, yes or no?
Because I got that, Shiv has got my piece.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, that we were going to have a couple of, 1, possibly 2 open houses. The front and center, I'm saying yes for city. I'm prepared to stand there and have anybody come and talk to me one-on-one, saying why they want no. It's town hall, old-fashioned politics, and now town halls are very popular. I'm with that. If we decide to do a mailer between now and June 12th, and we do an open house, I think we've done more than accommodate public consultation because on May 8th, just one more second, if you don't mind, I made a point of saying all the people on yes against us, none of them showed up. There were 2 people who showed up very passionately, and good for them. That's great. There could have been more show up, and they didn't. And that's a fair thing to say. And it's only one council meeting, I get that. But you know, June 12th, I respect my colleagues who voted against the motion to cause us to go to a 7 more consultation. I get that. I endorse that fully. I think a mailer, 1 open house for 1 or 2 if there's time, great. And on June 12th, we vote. Fair job. Be as open and honestly as possibly can, and this council is off to a great start, and we're going to keep with our next part. We've done more than enough effort to be consultative in this extra 1-month window, in my personal opinion.
Okay, Mr. Hilch, you okay with that? Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay. Okay, so in the interest of time,